tonight we're here to have a discussion I'm super excited about, a discussion about sort of data, where it's going, intersection data and engineering. And we have three amazing panelists. I'm super excited that are coming at this all from different angles. So our panelists, tonight you'll have me. I'm your moderator. I do some stuff. I do some investing, done some company things. We'll have Dominic Rosati. He's a senior research scientist at Site. I'll make sure Dom can introduce what that actually is in a second. We have Rima. I'm not going to attempt that, but Rima Al-Sheikh, I should, who's a founder and CEO of Begin, super cool company. I'm super excited that she's here. And Srijata Chatterjee, who's a co-founder and head of product at LeadSift, which actually just got acquired, I think, in the last couple of months. So super excited to have her here. And also, congrats. I mean, that's amazing. Part of a founder journey is when you get to sell your company. And that's a huge amount of validation for all the hard work you've done. Before we get started, I want to mention one thing. HellaHacks is mostly a volunteer organization. We do have some lovely paid volunteers. I guess not paid volunteers, some lovely paid individuals to help make this work. I would like to point out that Miranda does a lot of work inside the community to help us drive this stuff, right? To help us have these events. And it wouldn't be without these sponsors to help us raise funding. We're a registered nonprofit. To employ lovely people like Miranda and hold these events, we wouldn't be here. So these are some lovely folks that believe in our mission, and they believe in building up the ecosystem. And I'm super, super excited to have them on board as always. So with all that said, I will stop sharing my screen. We will get on with the show, so to speak. And with that, I'd love to pass it to Dom. Dom, I'd love for you to give us a little introduction to who you are, where you work, what you're working on, what gets you motivated, and a fun thing about yourself, because who doesn't love fun icebreakers?
Okay, fun thing that you know is I have a cute dog named Lou, who's a Whippet. And if you've never seen a Whippet, it's like a mini Greyhound. Well, it's not as mini as an Italian Greyhound, but quite a skinny bag of bones. He's very fast. That's the fun thing. Yeah, so I'm Dominic Rosati, but you call me Dom. And I guess my background is machine learning research, especially in the language domain. And I've done a bunch of other kinds of software engineering type of things, and computer vision and reinforcement learning and time series stuff and all kinds of things. But primarily what I do is, and it's like, I guess it's my research program, is I work on this project or company, I suppose, called Site. It's site.ai. And what we do is we analyze scientific literature, primarily for the purposes of linking mentions between documents. And most of us know like citations as mentions between documents. And so in some senses, we're like a giant citation index where you can see how literature talks about other literature, and we classify it. We do all kinds of machine learning-y stuff. And besides that, like my main kind of focus is right now is basically on large language models like GPT-3 and those kinds of things, and why they're really bad at doing scientific NLP and how to make them better at that. So yeah. Oh yeah, and I guess in terms of like data science, I come at, like, I'll just give a tiny bit of context before going into things. Like I come at things very much from the like machine learning researcher, engineer side of things. So that's like model production, and this is like in the language domain. So it's less about like analytics and insights. So I know about that stuff too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dom. Srijata, I'd love for you to give us a little introduction to yourself. Hopefully with some of the questions I asked, which I think I don't even remember what they all were. I think it was something fun, what you work on, something, where you work today, a little bit of LeadSift, but also I think a little bit of your background in the data world, because I know you do a lot of it at LeadSift.
Sure, yeah. So the fun thing, thank you very much, Tom. I have a dog. That's pretty much where it ends. So I'm going to use the same one. Yeah, my Instagram is pretty much dedicated to my dog right now. I'm a co-founder at LeadSift. My background is in social media, machine learning, NLP, natural language processing, and the business kind of came out of that about 9-10 years ago. And we've built, like, it was started by a bunch of nerds, and we built a lot of really cool technology over the years that nobody wanted to buy, and learned our lesson. And I think about like 4 years ago, our last pivot was not as cool technologically, but something that was useful. And we got acquired late last year. So I can tell you a lot about really cool software and what actually people want to use. Yeah, that's it.
So that sounds, I'm super excited to like have Dom, Sujata, and Rima, another local entrepreneur who is also working on actually some really, really interesting tech. Introduce yourself, tell us something fun about yourself, Rima. We'd all love to learn about you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I don't have a dog, but I had a baby in the beginning of the year, so that's that's been the highlight of my social media presence, if you will. It's funny, we had the baby at the time I was raising capital, so it was like by walking into the room, in the hospitals, like reading the safe agreements. Well, so yeah, I am an immigrant. I came to Halifax just a few years ago, and my work has been primarily in commercialization of technology. So first, it was like I built a company for software engineering on demand, and then I was a consultant for a while, helping enterprise companies build machine learning and take it to production. That pain, trying to take something cool to production. And then now we're building Begin AI, which is a decentralized machine learning SDK, which basically is designed to help the software developers, integrate machine learning in their applications in like a very fast and easy way. So yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Congratulations, by the way. Knowing some of the raising money pain, I can't imagine doing that plus having a child at the same time. So that's incredible. Good. Awesome. So I'd like to jump us off. I think I'm going to ask, as I was telling them pre to the start, I'm going to asking some very basic softballs with some big broad questions. And I think big broad questions are great because they help us frame up like where are we at. And so Dom, I'd love to start us off with you. When you look at the data space, which is this very broad thing, and I think you mentioned it actually in the beginning of your question, in the beginning of your introduction, is you focus on like machine learning and specifically some very advanced parts of like the machine learning realm. I would love for you. Can you paint sort of what like when you think of data? Can you paint like what that means to and who you think the different audiences of data are? That'd be lovely.
I could probably give like an interesting perspective from like an extremely small startup where, because we're like 6 people, and you might think like, oh, maybe there's not that much there, but I think, I mean, first of all, like we process tens of millions of like scientific documents, and so we have a lot of data, and that means a lot of different things. So what I had mentioned in the beginning is kind of like how do we build a product based on natural language processing to do something? So like tell when a paper is mentioning a concept, or tell when a paper. So that's kind of like a product meets engineering meets like research side of things, because the research side of things, how do we do it novelly, or something we haven't done before? The engineering side is like, how do we put in practice? And the product side is how to make it useful. But then there's like, so for us, we work with publishers, academic publishers like Elsevier, Wiley, BMJ, these kinds of companies. And for them, they look at data as like their primary assets of scientific text. So then there's like this business transactional aspect of text, where in order for us to do anything from a research or engineering or product perspective, there has to be this like business agreement thing. So and in our realm, it's like indexing agreements, but in other realms, there'll be something like contracts. And then there's like engineering aspects to that too, which is things like, okay, how do we securely transfer it? And unfortunately, it is shipping of hard drives that are like terabytes of content. For us anyway, that's how publishers want to do it. And so there's that, and then there's like the thing which I think, you know, is more commonly thought of as data science in sort of other realms, which is like insights about the business themselves, which is something that like we do in terms of like as a startup, you know, we're looking at Stripe and we're like, okay, we'll run this experiment, like tweak this pricing and try to have some kind of outcome that, you know, hopefully that will cause this many people to like change the plan and so on. So there is like that as well. And then that's like, and then that feeds into the product of consuming product analytics for producing that. So like that is like our, you know, least sophisticated thing. That's like guessing for us. But of course, you know, many people are probably read these things of teams at Facebook and so on that, you know, do like multi-arm bandit analysis and all these kinds of things of determining which button color they should change and so on. So yeah, like yeah, I guess that's. I'll throw in one more one, if I may. And it's like we produce like a novel data set, which is something I think that people don't really think about like as companies producing novel data sets, but it's like happens more frequently than you think. And so then there's like the consumption of the novel data set by other researchers. And for us, that's bibliometrics researchers. And they do something that's similar to like what marketing data science people would do, which is like statistics of these things. And so, yeah, there's the working with, I guess would be like academic partners. So that's kind of like another. So yeah, there's a lot of consumers of that data. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I think you painted like a great picture for us in terms of like specific for site and all the different aspects of like data, and both on the machine learning side and how you create data assets, and you have like sort of product analytics, then you have sort of like data as a product, right? Which these bibliographer researchers based on like this corpus of text that you're generating. And then all of the other wonderful things like insights from that drive a business forward. So both like for you, data is both a product that you sell, right? You drive insights from, but also use data about how people use the data that you produce to drive the business. Sujata, I'd love because I know you spent so much time in the social media realm and the marketing side. I'd love for you to also like take it to expand on this sort of idea, right? Because I think one of the most difficult things when we think about data as a space is just understanding what does this mean? Like data science, let's first narrow in on like when we talk about data, what do we actually mean about it? So I'd love to get your perspective of this question.
I actually don't have anything to add to this. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Rima, I think you are building a product right now to enable people to use data. So
yeah, I guess like you know, as Ian said, there are it's a wide spectrum of stakeholders that we face every day, right? Like you have the, you know, the person who produces the data, who hopefully one day will be the owner of their own data set, the individual, I believe. And then you have, you know, all the, like the series of the whole supply line of controllers and processors and all that stuff. And the thing that frustrated me the most is the loss of information on the way, like, you know, from the device that produces the data all the way to like the final, you know, company that actually has the resources and actually has the money and the budgets to build upon this data. You lose so much information on the way, and then you end up building like extremely biased models because they, you know, they're trained on like a teeny tiny trend that, you know, happened to have strong internet or something. So so that's like that probably most applicable in the consumer world, but also in the enterprise world, you see similar trends. So that motivated me to think of like, how can we, you know, work through techniques like federated learning and decentralized learning to enable more stakeholders in the process of generating machine learning models and, you know, bringing them to the world. So yeah, like this is the way kind of the way I start to think about the ecosystem, and I feel like we have a very long way to go in a sense of like how do we engage all stakeholders in a rewarding fashion, and that doesn't end up in like, a CEO in a big enterprise saying, hey, I have $1 billion, I need to spend it on AI, and really don't know how, and which is a very common case right now. So yeah.
I think that brings up like a great question and a good segue to like, I think we talked a lot about how data is being used in some of the chat, and now we're starting to kind of get to like, we'll get to some of the questions, but I think also it's useful to talk about, and it's an incredibly broad question, but I think, from your perspectives, I'd love to hear where you're seeing people fail, like they're trying to apply data to problems or, things you've seen fail, right? Like in my personal life, I've seen people overly apply data actually to certain things that like, or lean too heavily on data to make business decisions like, oh, the data is not there. Well, it's actually, is that because the data is wrong, or hypothesis is correct, or is that because the data point, thing you've chosen is incorrect, and you're over, optimized the right things, or is because you're using like a trailing indicator versus a leading indicator? I think there's all this whole aspect on top of just like, the broad thing. I'd love to hear from your different perspectives where you see some people go wrong. And Srijat, I'm gonna pass this one to you because I think you probably have a lot of experience here, just in your own experience working at and building LeadSift.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think, like Rima mentioned, like people have $1 billion and they want to spend it in AI. I don't think that's the way it should be done, because like figure out what is the problem you want to solve and what's the best way to solve it. You don't have to use AI to build a cool product, and that's what people are doing. And then like getting good data is actually way more difficult than we think it is. Like data that's clean, data that's actually complete, that's balanced, that's not easy, and people will start. And the other thing, I think one of the people are trying to prove their point using data now because they think that's the easiest way to get away with whatever they're trying to prove. So, and I mean, big data is pretty much like most of the models are statistical models, and you can tell any story you want with statistical models. So like it can go wrong very easily if not done very scientifically.
Amazing. Rima, I saw you on mute, so I want to give you the option to add in.
Yeah, I guess I love what Srijita said. Like it's A, start with the problem, not the solution. B, the data acquisition problem. I feel like one of the most common trends that I've seen is the perception of data. So like we had one very, very long time ago when, enterprises were starting to think of AI. We had like an auto manufacturer saying, I want to build machine vision to recognize a trailer, basically. And it was just, they sent a picture of a trailer parked in a parking lot with a bunch of other cars, and they're like, this is all you need to train it. Like I can look at it and I understand it's a trailer. Why can't the machine understand this is a box? And we're like, well, let me see, how can I explain this to you? And it goes also the opposite way, where you have like a sample of data and you're like, let me go and draw a picture for you, like Srijita says. So definitely on the same wavelength here.
Love it. Yeah. Dom, I'd like to get your perspective, but I think one of the things like that I'm building off of sort of what Rima and Srijat was talking about, I'd love to zoom in on just like machine learning. I think there's been a lot of discussion. Now we get into some deeper questions because you all have set us up. Like there's been a lot of discussion, data is a very broad place, but if we zoom in on machine learning, even inside machine learning, we have these statistical, linear regressions, we have, deep learning models. Where do you see, even within the confines of like the world in which you live, applying, some of these new techniques, some that are older than others, right? To solve some of the problems you're doing every day at site? Like what are the challenges you're seeing people run into with data and just getting value from data within the confines of machine learning?
Well, I think so. In some senses, like I have a different perspective, because so like I'm trying to think of the best way to like frame it. So there's kind of these two streams of doing things with data, I guess specifically coming from a machine learning perspective, like there's these two streams, and one is like, and they both on the face of it are similarly constrained by what Rima and Srijata had mentioned about, like, you should start with the problem, but then they diverge based on one stream being like, okay, I have a product problem in a business context that has a short or medium term window where I want to solve a thing and I want it to turn into money. That solution to turn into money somehow, and it can come, money can come, indirectly and so on. And so I think in that stream of things, like particularly for machine learning, I think it's a matter of knowing basically what are the current limitations on state of the art things, and as long as you're sort of familiar with that, then as long as you have some experience, you have kind of some guarantees about what kinds of problems you could solve given something. So you could say like, oh, we'll need this much data, or we can't here's a good one, like we can't really have a language thing that reasons and respects negation. So like saying no in words, that is a limit. Okay, but there are other things in language, like extracting entities, which is not a limit. So within that stream, then yeah, like totally, as long as you know those limits, and that's what we come up with. Again, when we're doing things, we go, okay, well, we could build an extractive question answering thing on top of our search for scientific articles, that's fine. But as soon as we think about building abstractive search, which means that, or question answering, which means I ask a question and a model generates a summary, not extracting from text, but from scratch, then we know there's going to be safety issues and misinformation, so especially within science. Now, okay, so there's that stream. Then there's the other stream where like it's kind of like, okay, so if you were this person who has $1 billion and you want to invest in AI, and you're not constrained by like needing a short or medium term return on this, so now you've moved into OpenAI, DeepMind, FAIR, or now Meta AI territory, where basically you are investing in research where quality doesn't have to do with failure. In fact, failure is a very good thing. But failure has to be defined precisely, and what it is if you can produce a negative result against like a well specified test and like evaluation scheme, that's great. Now you know something. Or positive result, that's great. Either one's fine. And as long as you're continually pushing against like whatever limit there is, then eventually one day, and this is how like scientific discovery works, there'll be some kind of architecture you come up with, and now you respect negation when people put in commands for your robot or whatever, and then you can take that and transfer it over, but you have no guarantees that will happen. And so like the $1 billion person, they have, it depends on what they want. They have to like, basically they'll probably some kind of like Elon Musk person and so you'll have to tell them like, no way, like these are the limits if you want to make money, but secretly, I don't know, in my opinion, you should be encouraging them to like invest in the things that are kind of moonshots, really. That's kind of a long rambling answer, but it's just like a different perspective of failure, I suppose. But then you have different modes of failure within research, right? So it's kind of what you mentioned, where it's super easy to come up with a research project that just kind of dissolves into nothing because you end up not having like a testable hypothesis that like can produce a concrete result within like constraints that you have for collecting data and so on. or sometimes you have an experiment and it produces something, or like an this happens, you have an idea for a new architecture for something, but you have no way to test it whether it's good or not. Yeah.
Amazing. Rima, I saw you on mute, so I'm gonna pass the ball to you on this one.
Yeah, I love Dominic's kind of like, exploration of all the potential possibilities of how to spend $1 billion. So actually, I mentioned it out of experience. Like there was an actual organization who had to deal with the situation. But what I noticed is they often, want to show something like, a digital transformation kind of bucket if they're at such large scale, right? So they want to report back to say like, this is what we're doing. And, beside the PR stunt, there's more, like there's, actual real, what I've seen is like, there are real opportunities for optimization in these large organizations where you can be like, someone was optimizing their methods of oil drilling. Someone was optimizing their, security, like airport security screening methods. Sometimes there are like a lot of ways you can use machine learning, in my experience, to optimize and improve. But the challenge that was always noticed is that, you might have the data, you might have the history, you might come up with the results, but actually building trust and confidence in these results is a huge problem. Like, because that becomes like organizational mental shifts. That's more of like a change management situation than a scientific problem. And then you have the other thing, which is like, okay, I get an F1 score. What the heck is an F1 score? Like, the actual results of data science, sometimes the metrics are very difficult to translate into meaningful business, stakeholder friendly insight. It's like, yeah, I have a great confusion matrix. It looks great. Like, you're confusing me. What is a confusion matrix? You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I mean, I think this builds off of my experience. And one of the things I'm just thinking about is, I think one of the general questions, right, is if you're data unaware, let's assume, you're not like a data scientist, you haven't done a lot of practice, but, increasingly, we need to be data literate. And what I mean by that is like, as an engineer, I need to really understand more than I understand like my ASIC compliant transactional database and how I store stuff inside Postgres and potentially how I generate product analytics, maybe how I ETL that stuff into a data warehouse so that, a VP product like Srijata could then drive some insights into how the business is doing based on data we're collecting inside our software stack. But increasingly, I also need to be aware of like the fact that the data that we're creating in my SaaS company, as an example, is valuable. But one of the things I think that's really difficult for us all to navigate, and increasingly inside organizations, is how do we make good product decisions about what to do with our data and what is a good worthwhile investment. And Srijata, I'd love like to get your sort of perspective on, how do you think about what are the key things to consider when dealing with data, both from an analytics perspective, but also when making investments in, let's say, data infrastructure? I think those are like some key questions before you even get to the question whether I should have like a full-blown data team, right? It's like, what are some of the key questions to consider just like data in general, right? I'd like to start with the simple and then we can get back to the more advanced. I think that seesaw also helps us navigate the landscape very well. So anyways, that's my thought at least.
My perspective wouldn't be very broad just because like the largest company I've ever worked for had like 7-8 employees. Like LeadSift's actually the largest company that I've ever worked for, and we have 13 employees now. So and like it's always been startups. Like my first job, second job, third job, they've always been in startups. So there's a huge constraint in terms of resources, right? So, like we need to see results right away. We cannot like spend a lot of money on, like spend 6 months or a year researching on something and then it's a failure and we cannot push it to prod. That's not possible. But at the same time, like we do work with data, and the only way to do something better than writing if then else statements is really introducing machine learning, right? Like building something new. We can't just be crawling the data and doing if then else statements on it, and then it's not really a product. So we've like we've built a lot of really cool models, like cutting edge, this and that. And then what we find is it takes too long and it doesn't always perform better than, let's say, your knife phase, or whatever is the simplest solution. What is it called? Occam's razor, I think. So that's actually super valid when dealing with, I guess, anything, but definitely dealing with large data when we need to see results right away. And that's definitely something that we've come across a lot, just because, like, I mean, Google can afford to have 1,000 researchers research for 5 years and then call it, oh, we learned something that this doesn't work. But a lot of companies cannot afford that. And we're definitely one of them. So we usually try and see, okay, what's the simplest solution? How can we do better? And I think another thing that I always tell my team is that we're not doctors. We're not creating like an autopilot for a plane. So it's okay to have 80% accuracy, but sometimes it's not. And I don't know if machine learning is like completely unsupervised machine learning is ever a good solution in cases like that.
I love that perspective. That's a great thought. I mean, I think working with like language models, analyzing these like large bodies of text that are, generally written, there's like anyone who's written or has read a research paper knows that there's like kind of a methodology in a way in which they're written in a certain type of language. But how do you think about like deciding when you're approaching a task, your team is approaching a task, how have you thought about navigating sort of this like complexity and sophistication model versus, more simplistic models? And where do you start? Like if someone were to start a project today and try to think about it, like how would you suggest that they start something and make some of these decisions?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is what Srijata said, where like I'm very much in the school of thought of like do the most basic thing first. So like oftentimes, and this may touch on like one of the questions that was asked in the How Hacks chat earlier of like what sort of around process and so on. But like oftentimes when we're doing things, it's just like, what is the thing that already does this that we can just see it, like often cases a pre-trained model of some sort, that we can just like steal that and do a thing and then make it look like it does the real thing. And actually, like in terms of product, we do that a lot where because we're extremely small startup, grant funded, not even like venture funded. So, mostly funded through our own revenue at this point. It's like, we have to do this. So we have to like do a thing, ensure that will turn into some kind of like customer satisfaction exchange of money. And so, yeah, like oftentimes that is like a faked out human in the loop or simple thing. But like, I think there's like what I had mentioned before, where there is another factor to it. And it's kind of like, it really depends on who you're working with, because like we work with like one of the people, he is basically, I guess he's like an advisor to us. He's like the world expert in document layout understanding. So this is like, how do you basically the problem of how do you take a PDF and get structured text out of it? And so like for him, what's easy and simplest is like his own, methods or whatever. So when you're working with somebody, like if they have expertise in something, it's like easier and faster for them to do it the good way from the beginning sometimes. And I think that's probably the case for me too, where like it's easier for me like to, well, now it's kind of old, but like it's easier for me to like fine tune a language model to do a thing, which before was cutting edge, like kind of old. But yeah, like so rather than I don't know, try to force some other thing to make it look fake or devise some human in the loop scheme. So yeah, like those are just kind of, I guess, some sketches from our perspective. But yeah, I'd like to like emphasize that in a startup context, like rather than a research context, though maybe even Okay, so yeah, I do want to say one more thing. So yeah, in a startup context, I want to emphasize that, like, yes, we do have to focus on doing things that will turn into money-ish stuff. From a research context, you do things dumb at first, but you do them in a different way, which I had just remembered, which is like basically what you do is you and it just occurred to me because I was thinking of like a project I'm doing where it's like about analogical reasoning. You know, QRS becomes QRT. What does ABC become? And one thing you can do is like you generate synthetic data, and so which is along the lines of like and you generate synthetic data on a model that you know is going to get some sort of accuracy. So basically what you're doing with the experiment is you are creating a baseline, and baselines are, and it's something like if you're familiar with like machine learning research, you'll see now more than you ever have before, is like baselines are just an awesome way of being productive of doing things. So actually, yeah, now that I say it is similar to like doing the simple thing. But so yeah, having some sort of baseline from a research or from a product perspective is like really a good way to like sketch out, you know.
Awesome. I'd love to sort of turn this question, and I want to move over to the sort of something we started at the beginning, which is like this large, broad problem of data availability, right? Which is, how do I get the data I need? And there was a question in chat around Facebook being featured in the news, and I love this question. For those without a background, those that know, part of my background is most recently I was working on a company focused on secure multi-party computation plus federated learning to solve some of these challenges. And Rima, I know you're working on in a similar space, so I'm going to pass this one to you. I'd love to, like, you know, as we think about, and sometimes people frame the internet and products up into Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, which is like, you know, DOM, HTML, reactive, like interactive apps, and Web 3 being all of those things, plus the forms of decentralization and some, you know, there's lots of things associated with that context today. We're not going to go into all of them, but some of them is this sort of decentralization nature, right? And so it would be great, you know, as you think about data, how we get data, how do we power sort of this like future? I'd love to get your perspective on how do we get access to data, and how do we get access to data in like a healthy and ethical manner, right? And how does data and ethics, how those two things converge? Both in sort of like applied business context. So like I'm trying to solve a problem. There's like a user on my website and like click tracking and stuff, but also in the larger, broader context of like bias. And I know that's a very broad subject, but I think it's like an important thing for us to discuss if we're going to talk about like data science, machine learning. So Rima, I'm going to pass this one to you. I know I just passed you like a giant like ball of spaghetti of a question, but it's more to bring up a topic and do a little introduction at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, great questions. This is all we think about all day at Begin. So I believe that a system or an ecosystem where everybody benefits is an ecosystem that succeeds on the long term. When you have one person benefiting and everybody else, like, you know, getting marginalized, you end up in monopolization and huge problems. So I think decentralization enables a better ecosystem, because I think one day in the future, you know, you're going to have like every person become their own kind of data scientist. And we might laugh at this idea now, but if I draw a parallel from the advertising industry, it used to be back in the days, you need to have like a branding agency, advertising agency, like a whole massive team to build an advertising campaign for you. But now you can just go on Facebook and create like an ad and you're good to go. And I think one day, you know, people will be enabled to like access the global data pool. And to do that, we need people to be owners and active participants in this. So that's a philosophical like division where we're going with, you know, the Begin and decentralized technology and Web3 and all that stuff. And I think it'll solve for like in a business context, like how do I solve? I'm looking right now, I am a fintech company. I want to classify users' expenses. Very simple, straightforward problem. Okay, so you have two options: copy every person's data to a server, and good luck with like information loss, internet connections, you know, people dropping sessions, all that stuff. and you're left with the percentage of the data that's probably not sufficient for for a great model. It might be, if you're a huge company like millions and millions of users, you might end up, if you're lucky, with 100,000 users data. And if they all live in North America, you're really good at predicting Netflix, and you have no clue about the rest of the world. So how do you expand your view? I think decentralization enables us to expand that view, because users' data is already on their devices. If you're able to have a solution that allows you to process the data on a device in a decentralized fashion, I think then you benefit from including all users in the game. I think bias, I think a lot of people talk about bias as this little crazy evil thing. And it is in kind of, bias can be useful. Bias is, if we look at bias in a sense of I'm going to build a model that learns all my preferences and become, Rima/model who negotiates on behalf of Rima in the world, then I'm building a great personalization model. And that is a super biased model. That is Rima's copy, as biased as Rima is. Rima doesn't like ice cream, Rima likes cake, great, right? So, but the problem with bias when deployed by central data sets is it goes and says everybody, you're gonna eat ice cream and you're gonna eat it right now. That's when it gets really messy, right? So put it in a business sense, we recently worked on voice synthesis application. So I want to clone a person's voice for business applications. Yeah, I want the model to be very personalized to this person's voice. That is 100% biased. But there are the bias for profits, and the bias when it comes unethical, I believe, is where you have the Cambridge Analytica situations where people start using biased information to deliver to the world. They can start a war, literally. If you have the ability to ignite negative news in a community in a way that you just get people really upset about each other, that's when you deliver. That's when bias become extremely harmful. So I think there's definitely the ethical and moral responsibility of the creators and authors of models. But I think when there's a larger ecosystem, when there are more companies participating, everybody's building AI, it becomes much simpler problem to solve. But right now, we're going after Facebook and we're stop being biased. And why would they listen? It's right. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Srijat, you've worked so long in social media and helping lots of different parties navigate that world. I'd love to get your perspective on both the larger data bias question, but also just your perspective on this topic at large. I think you have probably a unique perspective as a result of some of the work that you did at LeadSift on what is bias? How do we deal with bias? When does bias matter? When does it not? I think Rima answered some other things, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
I also want to touch on the Web 3.0 thing.
Love to hear that too. Yeah, absolutely. Touch on it all. It's all the world's your oysters.
That's a really good idea. It's in its infancy, but it has to really provide value to establish itself. Web 2.0 has created massive wealth. And although NFT of someone's celebrity crush is great to own, but ultimately there needs to be real value attached. So that if it's completely decentralized, nobody's owning something, yeah, I think there's a lot left to be figured out over there. Anyway, that being said, I'm not saying that I'm not investing in any of that, but I have my doubts. And so in terms of bias, same thing, right? If it makes money, like Cambridge Analytica, and honestly, if you've seen that movie or that show, they're not even doing anything that bad. That's what every advertising company does. It just made, it just happened to happen at the perfect time, and they told, somebody told a really beautiful story but every advertising company is doing what Cambridge Analytica did. It's not unheard of. And that's why That's why we have email for free. That's why we have Facebook or Instagram or, you know, whatever you're using, Snapchat. That's the reason that we have that for free. If you're not paying for it, you are the product, and there's always going to be bias because that's the only way that they can make money out of it, right? So I don't see that as a bad thing. And like Rima mentioned, like the bias can also be a good thing if I'm trying to personalize something, right?
I'd like to shift sort of, I think that was like an important thing to hit on, because every time you talk about like in this broad category of topics, you end into like the bias, data availability, decentralization, how do I collect the data, how, you know, all these different things in the context of, say, the modern enterprise. Getting data probably is increasingly less of a problem because we have so much of it, and more it's a question of like data cleaning, right? And how do I get the feature set I need to do something? And so I'd love to spend like the last 5 minutes talking about the workflow, right? And I'm gonna pass this to Dom, and then I'd love to pass to you, Srijata. But just broadly speaking, I'd love to hear like what you're most excited about, what's changed in the last 2 to 3 years about like the data science, machine learning workflow, and where you see things going. I'm going to pass this to all three of you because I think it's like a very important topic for us to end off on. And I think one of the other things that'd be amazing for us to talk a little bit here is, of those things, how much of this large, broad area do you think it ends up, and this will be a follow-on question, so you don't have to answer this first, but to start putting in your mind, how much do we see this sort of set of data science and machine learning in the same way that code is now perforating the enterprise, and you have lots of people writing code and there's no code tools, how do we see this data science sort of workflow, this machine learning workflow moving to other parts of the organization over time? Dom, I'm gonna start with you, then Srijata, and then Rima. That's the order I've decided. But yeah, I'd love to hear what do you think has really changed over the last 2 years to read the question with the data science work, the machine learning workflow? What are some of the new tools that are most excited? What are you most excited about in the coming years about how things are evolving?
So I'll start with something really boring, and then I'll say something maybe controversial. So boring, like these. So the tooling that and workflow stuff that we use isn't new. I remember, I don't know when it was, like maybe like 2014 or something, when I first saw like a tensor board. So you could like see these visualizations as your model is training and so on in TensorFlow. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then like different things come out, and there are all kinds of things that are so obvious and so boring now, like versioning large data sets and model versioning and so on. So like, I'll just like give a shout out to weights and biases, because I think weights and biases is the best thing since sliced bread. And it's just all those boring things. It's like experiment tracking and hyperparameter tuning, and it's just like having a report of, you know, all the things you're doing. So as you're using that in conjunction with like notebook and you're making things reproducible, then like things are just generally clean and nice. And then I guess the second thing to that is like language models, which I, you know, Hugging, if you've ever used Hugging Face, is pretty awesome. So you can take like, and there's a lot ways, so much more that I could say about this that have to do with like bias and so on. But well, you know, you can take these large language models like BERT, and you can take some tasks, and with very little training, you can be way better than you ever would have been in the past. So I think that's another boring thing. Now, what I think, where I actually think things will go, and like, is, I don't know if anyone's ever used Codex or Google, or sorry, GitHub Copilot, but I do think that prompt engineering is going to be the future of all machine learning, all machine learning tooling, everything. So what prompt engineering is you have an extremely large language model that you prompt, and it does the task that you say. And you might think it's a bit bizarre, like, how can it do this on my task? And I went through that, and basically everything I can think of a way to prompt engineer to do it. So like, I do think this like zero-shot learning paradigm will become the paradigm for insights on an entire data set. You'll prompt a 10 terabyte Postgres data set for an insight you want, or you'll just say, give me insights. Like, and it sounds bizarre, and like that feels like now I'm over prompting something, but but like, yeah, I do think prompting like zero shot on large language models is where it will, where everything will be. And maybe one tie back to like harm and bias is that like one thing that like Facebook, DeepMind, OpenAI are all doing really, really good at is they have dedicated teams to producing benchmarks for harm, factuality, faithfulness, and so on. And there's this thing that I don't know if you know, there's this research group, Loiter AI, that produces like a free open AI GPT thing. And they have this thing called language model harness. And basically all these language models are supposed to go through these harm tests and so on. So, and that's something that, Facebook pioneered. So like they probably should have, having pioneered also misinformation tactics and stuff. So yeah, I guess that's what I'll say.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Srijay. I'd love to learn sort of your perspective on the last 3 years and what excites you most over the next couple of years. Yeah.
I think, like you mentioned, like there's a lot of tools now that's making big data, machine learning, etc., all very accessible. And like probably 10, 12 years ago, we think that everybody should learn programming because not English, but computer language is going to be the most common language. I think it's getting there with big data as well, because we're at a stage where people are expecting it to help our life, and like not just accept it, but expect it to happen. Like, for example, like why didn't it spell check, or like why isn't Google completing the sentence for me or telling me when to leave the house or whatever, right? Like all of those things. So moving forward, I'm hoping that a lot more things will use data science in it to make it easier for us, not just someone making money out of it. And I think what excites me is the concept of, well, I guess meta or whatever, like the whole connectedness, because there are some bad things that we have created in the last few years because technology has exploded so fast that, like people getting too disconnected, loneliness, or mental load from like having your information in 20 different platforms, whatever. Like, I mean, completely different issues, but they are technology issues that we've created. So I think we would be able to solve a lot of those issues with the new technology that we're working on, that everyone's working on.
That's a great answer. And Rima, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, exactly like the folks were saying. I think scale has been the theme for me in the last few years, where there were some cool models out there, and suddenly companies and businesses are interested in deploying models in production, and then you hit the scale problem of like data engineering around it. So we've seen a lot of like automation around pipelines, data streaming, offline data management. So the data engineering ecosystem has evolved a lot, and that enabled, I think, data science to evolve as well. Like zero shots models, I think I love them. Like transformers, zero shots, like this is just the coolest thing for a long time, right? And I think I'm particularly excited about what we're building at Begin. I think we're basically trying to enable a software developer to just say, I want to do a recommender system or a fake profile detection system or a classification system. And they just go like do a bit of tuning and install an SDK, and it's good to go. We're like, we process it, we put it in a graph database, like, which is really awesome. Developers didn't have access to the graph database because it's really complex to manage a massive graph database, but we're just making it easy and accessible. And that really excites me, to be honest. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think we're 4 minutes over. This has been an absolutely excellent conversation. I appreciate. I'll give all 3 of you like an opportunity to give some parting words, but generally speaking, I'm very hopeful. I think the future of data will unlock, if we think about it this way, the way I often frame these things is like what software tooling does, like HTML, CSS, PHP, all these like, Postgres, all these different data tools, that they really do is they help us accelerate the rate of innovation. And the next phase of that acceleration is now unlocking all this information we're collecting. And the biggest problem for society is navigating, well, if we have all this information, now how do we leverage technology in a way that's not harmful and is pro for society, not the harmful part? And this is always true of all technology. But at the end of the day, if you ever see those curves of over time of technology innovation, where 200 years ago we met the steam engine. Well, if you look at it, the rate of big breakthroughs is only getting smaller and smaller in time. And I think that's incredible. And every time we have a technological breakthrough, there's always a question on how we democratize the technology, how we make that available to people. But data is one of those places where, as we have more of it, and as we figure out how to better get access to that data, not centralization, and then we democratize access to the tooling to work with it, that unlocks like a huge amount of net opportunity for everybody. And then also that then as a result, we get like amazing things like new cancer drugs, right? And all these new insights we just couldn't have before. So I'm incredibly excited. Shuja, I'd love to give you like a moment here to make your plugs or have some parting words as we start to wrap this up, and then I'll pass it to Rima and Dom.
I'm good, but I think Lisa recommended this book, Weapons of Math Destruction. It looks very interesting. So thank you for that.
Ooh, I add that to my list right now. Rima, parting words.
I want to thank you for the opportunity. This is awesome to connect with the Holly House group at this, at this style. And please reach out if you want to connect, or now that we can have a beer. I'd love to connect with anyone who wants to reach out.
Awesome. And Dom?
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, again, if anyone's interested, and particularly if anyone's interested in sort of like language models or that kind of area of research or scientific analytics or those kinds of things, let me know. I'm always happy to talk about those things.
And I can attest that that Dom does in fact have a cute dog, and clearly Shujata, your dog is very cute as well. And Rima, I appreciate so much, and I hope you are doing great. And Miranda, I'm going to call on you because we have one more event coming up shortly. I think it's a Staff Plus event. I just don't have the date, so I'm hoping that maybe you can tell us all before we depart.
When Rima said like we can get a beer together now, I was like, ooh, yay, we can like plug our event. So we have this event called micro event. So we were running them back in November, December, but we took a break. So now they're up and running again. Our next one is on March 31st. And it is on the topic of Staff Plus. I've made the announcement. I posted the event in the announcements channel, so please hop on over there. It's $5. You get 2 beverages for choice. And this event is at Propeller on Quinpool. So, and also if you ever want to do an event on a topic, let me know and I will make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miranda. And you can find a link to the event on our website, hellahacks.com. Perfect. So for those wondering, and I thank all of you for listening and participating. And I was excited to do this, and I can't wait for our next one, which hasn't been announced yet, but we'll figure it out. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Bye.